Hello, wrestling fans. This is Sal Rough Cuts here in Orlando. I want to do a second part 2 tribute on the passing of Hulk Hogan for you and touch on a few more things I thought about after the video was posted. A couple of things I wanted to really talk about in memory, maybe a couple of matches and things. Let's not forget the movies. He was in a number of movies. Rocky III as Thunder Lips. Sylvester Stallone casted Terry to play the wrestler in the charity match in Rocky III. And Suburban Commando he was in. So he did a few movies. How about No Holds Barred, which started the feud with Zeus, Tony Lister, who had passed away. Where they had if you remember the movie, and then the match inside of a steel cage. It was like a double feature, but they had the movie No Holds Barred, and so Hogan was an actor. Did several movies. He did Thunder in Paradise for a number of years as well. That was filmed in Florida. Remember, that was kind of like the Knight Rider, I guess, right? They had remember Knight Rider with David Hasselhoff. They had the car going after people. Well, now they had the boat. Hogan wore an eye patch, and the reason behind the eye patch is that Hogan had surgery and had a problem with his eye, and that was the reason. It wasn't really part of the gimmick or anything, although he should have probably kept it on for the whole show, but he was having legitimately problems with his eye and had to wear the patch. So we can't forget, Thunder in Paradise actually was pretty good. I watched it. Had a lot of the wrestlers that were on there. Sting was on there. Sting was credited as Steve Borden, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Jimmy Hart. Had everybody, in wrestling that was on the show. And, it lasted a few seasons. People don't realize, when Hogan did those movies, he became part of the Screen Actors Guild. So, he made money. Doing those movies and what have you. Some of them were box office flops. Rocky III went on to be amazing, and Thunder in Paradise did very well. I think Suburban Commando wasn't so great, but the No Holds Barred, he did movies. He had an appearance in Gremlins. Remember the appearance in Gremlins where the Gremlins were doing their thing and the movie got cut off. So he had some cameos as well. So he became part of the Screen Actors Guild, and that had a lot of benefits and rewards in that. So you can't forget and deny that. He was smart in that regards. I just saw the interview with Ric Flair, and Ric Flair had broken down in tears. Howard Levin interviewed Flair. They had incredible chemistry. They had a different kind of chemistry, Flair said, as opposed to what he had with Ricky Steamboat. Flair had mentioned him and Steamboat had undeniable chemistry, but Hogan and Flair had a different type of chemistry in the ring, but said that they were friends outside the ring, and that Flair had just spoken to Jimmy Hart on Wednesday, yesterday, the day before Hogan passed, and everything was all in good spirits. So who knows? We just don't really know what the deal was. I don't know who the lady that was wiping the tears away from Flair. I don't know if that was one of his children or his partner. I don't know. But Flair was visibly upset. But he said it didn't hold any jealousy towards Hogan. Hogan made more money than Flair. And Flair had mentioned it wasn't Hogan that he was jealous of. It was the promotion. You got to understand, Flair being a part of the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, and David Crockett, that whole thing, but Hogan, Vince McMahon went global with the WWF during that time. The NWA stayed in the territory. If you were in the Charlotte, the North Carolina, the South area, that was the hotbed. Texas, Florida, but nationally and globally, Hogan was making a lot more money because it was a global thing, and Crockett was just in the territory. And you could understand, Flair had said that it wasn't, jealous of Hogan. It was about making money and drawing. It was, the promotion that Flair was angry with. And you could understand that, Flair was visibly upset. Like I said, their match in the WWF was not anything to write home about. It really should have been a WrestleMania type of event, but it was not. And, I know they had their matches in WCW. They had their matches in TNA. But the initial confrontation when Flair went up with the real World Championship, they should have built that up and they should have had it at WrestleMania. You know, the build and the chase and the whole thing leading up could have been blown the roof off, and Vince McMahon dropped the ball, partly because Vince McMahon just had a problem with WCW, NWA type guys. He buried everybody. You know, I mean, but they all came up. Look, Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson came up as the Brain Busters. They left. Dusty came up and left a few times. Flair came up. They all came up. The only one that didn't come up until the very end, the last one, was Sting. Sting was the last one to come up at WrestleMania in New York to face Triple H. But, I mean, you know, Vince buried everybody from those days. But, you know, it was so nice to hear Flair talk about it. He said that Hogan was when Flair was on the verge of dying, at a 2% chance of survival, Hogan was there with Charlotte, Flair's daughter, by his bedside. And also Hogan gave him money for rehab and didn't want it back. So there was some positive coming out of it. I read the post about Brutus Beefcake, that they were brothers and how much he loved Hogan, but they were not able to mend their friendship before Hogan's passing. So, I mean, you could understand that there were a lot of things that we don't know, and fences and bridges that were burned with Hogan and people that he helped, but you could see the outpouring of love that there was towards Hogan from his fellow camaraderies, and you're hearing that come out right now with Beefcake, Jake the Snake Roberts. It will be interesting to see here about everybody else. Maybe Vince McMahon makes a comment, maybe Stephanie and Shane make a comment. How about Dixie Carter? Maybe he makes a comment because Hogan was a part of it those days. Sting made a comment, you know, a very nice tribute. And we're going to hear more and more about it. You know, but a lot of fans, including myself, you know, we have that negative side of Terry, but we really just can't dwell on it. Hogan's gone. He's a Hall of Famer. He revolutionized professional wrestling. As I said in my Part 1 post, he was got to be on your Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. There is no doubt in my mind, or anybody's mind, he has to be on your Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. But I will say that Ric Flair was a better wrestler than Hogan, but Hogan and Flair together, you know, they make magic on a mic. You know, I do mean that. I mean, that's just, you know, Hogan revolutionized. Wherever Hogan went and you were in the ring with him, you drew money. You made money. That was the whole thing. The ultimate good versus evil persona thing. And we can't forget that. I mean, people are going to talk about all the negative stuff as political affiliations and, you know, the whole thing with the Bubba Love and his comments and things that he had made. But today is not the time or the place for that. Let's just back and reflect on, you know, his wrestling career through New Japan that I mentioned in Part 1, the AWA, the territories that he had worked in. When Vince McMahon brought him up, that was the month before Bob Backlund lost the title to the Iron Sheik, and then Hogan came up and got the pop, and that was it. You know, then Hulkamania took off when he beat the Iron Sheik and broke the camel clutch, and then went on this amazing run that started at Madison Square Garden. But, you know, Hogan's best work, a lot of people say, was in New Japan. I agree. If you go back and look at Hogan's work in New Japan, it was some of his best work. No doubt about that. His AWA stuff was actually pretty good as well. Legendary battles with Piper, you know, Dr. D. David Schultz, I think, was some of his best matches ever against Dr. D. Greg Valentine, Brutus Beefcake, you know, Savage, Orndorff. Everybody turned on Hogan. If you notice, everybody turned on Hogan. Or they became allies and they turned on Hogan. You know, that's just what it was. And Hogan drew money. You know, I think Flair said it best. Wherever Hogan went, Hogan drew and made money. And that's where you want it to be. And you can't deny that. So from his legendary time as an actor inside the square circle, his shops, his contributions to the Make-A-Wish Foundation, the list goes on and on. We may not agree with a lot of things. Like I said in Part 1, a lot of things I don't agree with. His Hogan Knows Best, I don't agree with it. I didn't care for it. The Richard Belzer incident really churned my stomach to this day, and some of the things that he had done over the years. I mean, he got booed when he came back on his last appearance with Raw. This generation of fans was not born in the 80s when Hulk Hogan was larger than life, and he was on the Johnny Carson, he was on every, talk show. Back in the 80s, when Bruno was basically past and done, the WWF, WWE, they were looking for the next superstar, and Vince McMahon found lightning in a bottle with Terry Hulk Hogan, and that's what it was. So Bruno sold out Madison Square Garden more than anybody, and you put that into perspective with the matches, and Bruno wrestled and all, but Bruno was not, global like Hogan was. Hogan became global because Vince McMahon had a vision. So you really can't say that it was all on Hogan, but Vince McMahon was the one who lit the fuse and this thing took off by collaborating together. It was Vince's vision that enabled Terry to take Hulk Hogan, Hulkamania to that level. So we do owe a lot of credit to Vince McMahon, despite what we may feel about Vince McMahon. We do want to give a lot of credit to Vince for allowing to light the fuse that started the whole thing all the way through the WrestleManias. WrestleMania, the whole point of WrestleMania was the main event was Hogan and Mr. T, another actor, came aboard to face Piper and Orton, and that whole thing just, it was just a lightning in a bottle, and wrestling took off, and Cyndi Lauper's contribution for the war to settle the score on MTV that led to WrestleMania, but Hogan was very much involved in all that, and the videos and all the music videos that they did. This was all because of Hogan. Hogan had a very vital part in that, so we can't ever forget that. So it is a very somber day. I did email Bill after offering my condolences and sympathies regarding the passing of his friend. Like I said, they crossed paths in the AWA under Vern Gagne's promotion. And, how will you remember Hogan? How will you remember? I think I got an email and I said, how personally would you remember Hogan? And I'll wrap it up. I'll say this. I'll remember Hogan as a larger-than-life character that brought an incredible amount of charisma and passion to the world of sports entertainment, to professional wrestling, the ultimate good versus the evil. When he hulked up and the fans went crazy, wanting to see the ultimate good guy triumph over evil. That's what I remember in a positive light. His promos, when he was hulking up and saying your prayers, taking your vitamins, being true to your school and the whole night, took all that to heart. But you tune into Saturday night's main event, you tune into Madison Square Garden or wherever you were, you tune in to see Hogan, especially when he was going down and, Orndorff turned on him, Savage turned on him. I remember when the Mega Powers first came together, before Savage started, the Mega Powers came together with Elizabeth. Everybody was going nuts. The place was going crazy. Or when he fought Piper and they wanted Hogan, to destroy Piper, that's what it was all about. But then later in the latter years, the NWO, when he turned heel, make Hogan a bad guy, that elevated the Monday Night Wars and, really lit the fuse for the Monday Night Wars when Hogan became part of the NWO. Like I said in part one, they ruined it after a while, but for a good 12 to 18 months, WCW had their moment with Hogan, Hall, and Nash. And then Hogan left. He went to TNA. Him and Flair started again. And then you got Sting and part of the Joker type thing. And that pretty much was the winding down, the end of Hogan's career altogether. As you can tell that, Father Time finally got caught up to him, for to say. But you saw that Hogan was reinventing himself and doing different things in different promotions. Behind the scenes, we heard a lot of things, no doubt. But at the end of the day, if you're going to have a Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling, I will remember Hogan as being on that Mount Rushmore, and as someone, I will say that he was a great talker, an average wrestler, but he did elevate wherever he went, he elevated wrestling. He made you want to tune into professional wrestling and wanted to watch wrestling because you watched because of him. And the opportunities that are available today were because of Hulk Hogan. But let's not also forget the promotion that he helped elevate. And Ric Flair said it too, it wasn't as political back then as it was now, but it was about making money and drawing money and getting the people to tune in. And Hogan was that guy because of Vince McMahon to be able to elevate and globally establish this larger-than-life character, and that's how we will remember Hulk Hogan. And that's how we'll remember. A champion in front of the camera, suspectable off camera, but there's no doubt what he brought to the world of professional wrestling. And you can see the tributes that are coming in and the outpouring. Never been more so than anybody in the world of professional wrestling that has since left us. So I will remember him as a larger-than-life character who brought wrestling to the forefront like no other. And with that being said, on this edition of Rough Cuts, may all your matches be your main event, and be safe and be well.